seem to be losing my voice. I don't really know exactly why, but so if I suddenly can't speak in the middle of this, just count your blessings instead. In today's gospel, Jesus asks, "Who do you say that I am? Who do the crowd say that I am? Who do the people that have come out to see me in such great numbers? What are they saying among themselves? Who do they say that I am?" It's an interesting question, isn't it? In one Catholic publication I read recently, they were commenting on this particular incident in the life of Jesus. And they said, Christ's question is not for himself, but for us. And the answer to this question may be the most important to our hearts. The identity of Christ. Who was this man who is also God with us? And then it goes on to say Jesus isn't having an identity crisis. And I thought about that, what that publication had said. And I said there certainly have been many times when I would have agreed with that. Jesus, I would have said also with them, Jesus was just asking this question in order to help the crowd, to help his disciples understand who he was. Jesus knew perfectly all along who he was. There were no surprises there. But Jesus was just asking them so that they might come to a deeper understanding over who he was. Having seen him in operation, seen him at work, how they answered that was going to be very important. And there's no question about that. That would have been very important. But I began to think this week about that answer that I myself would have proposed so often in the past. And I said to myself, why wouldn't Jesus, who had taken upon himself a human nature, not have asked that question sincerely? To be human means to be in a continual process of self-discovery. We are constantly learning who we are. We are a mystery even to ourselves, no matter how long we are alive, how many years we have. Even into our old age, we're discovering new things about ourselves, some pleasant, some unpleasant. People are reading us in different ways, and they challenge us. Am I really acting that way? How am I coming across? Is that really the way people are seeing me? In one way or another, we ask that question throughout our lives. Who am I? Who do you say that I am? And within that dialogue that takes place in human community, whether it be in our family, with the people that we work, the people that we meet with our friends and relatives, that continual dialogue assists us to continually probe deeper. Who am I? Who is this mystery that God has created in me? And how best can I fulfill what God's intention for me is? And Jesus, in his human nature, no doubt, was asking that question as well. He was asking, how am I coming across to you? Do you seem to be understanding what my mission is? What do you have to say in response to me? Because that gives me more of a reflection. The two ways in which Jesus reflected upon what God the Father was calling him to do was, first of all, in his prayer to God our Father, but secondly, in his dialogue, which was part of his human nature, with the community that he was with his family first, then with his disciples and his friends, and then later with the people that would come and follow him, and even in the dialogue with the people who seemed to be opposed to him, right? The Pharisees and the scribes, who were constantly asking him questions, presuming him to be saying one thing, and where he had to stop and say, no, that's not what I mean at all. So as I say, that's part of our human nature. that throughout our lives, in one way or another, we ask people, who do you say that I am? And we ask ourselves, is that what I want to be? For example, we ask our friend to tell us something about the way in which we're acting, the way in which we're seeing things, and our friend might ask us, do you want me to be honest with you, or do you want me to lie in order to spare your feelings? In other words, do you want me to really dialogue with you, or do you just want me to make you feel good, And you may say back to them, well, you say whatever you think is honest, and I'll tell you whether I think you're right or not. And then the dialogue goes on from there. So you see it happens, just like that. Parents are constantly clarifying the way in which their little children perceive them. My mother was always clarifying with us how we were perceiving her, and particularly when we got it wrong. What the heck do you think I am, a slave or something? She would say, very kindly and gently, when we expected her to pick up our rooms, you see. And we would ask our parents, why do they perceive us, me as an individual, in a special way? Why do you expect me to always be the one that's good, You let the other kids get away with everything, particularly if you're, I don't want to ask how many of you are the oldest child. One of the questions you always ask if you're the oldest child is, why did those other kids get away with so much when we always had to toe the line? Our parents were only willing to experiment after we were born. Why do I have to be the one that's responsible? And so we're constantly, in one way or another, without our even realizing it, having reality checks with others, having conversations, asking people, how are you perceiving me? And then evaluating that, and sometimes learning some very important things about ourselves that we had not perceived ourselves. We are constantly growing in that way. And that way we're constantly, in a sense, a mystery to ourselves throughout our lives. And particularly when we reach that moment in our life and we try to discern what is God's will for me. Someone just asked me this morning, how old were you when you first thought that you might have a priestly vocation? And I said, it was around the 4th grade. I can remember we had a little vocation movie, and it was at that time when it became very clear to me that I really wanted to think more about this as a possible option. And of course there were many things that happened over the years that made me think twice about it, think about other alternatives. But the question always was, among other questions, what is it that God is calling me to? Am I going to truly be, if I follow this path, am I truly going to be the authentic person that God created me to be, or does God have other plans for me? And that was a question, particularly in the seminary, that I was always asking, because in first year of seminary I had 53 classmates, and 2 years later when I went to the novitiate I had only 7 classmates. So a lot of them were answering that question differently. So how about Jesus? Jesus asks, who am I? Who do you think that I am? And he's interested in their response. Jesus intends in his human nature to learn something from their response. And then maybe even to think a little bit more about what they said. When Jesus asked, who do you say that I am? It is Peter who says something that kind of shakes and rattles Jesus. He never says that Peter's wrong. As a matter of fact, in some of the other Gospels, he actually tells Peter, no mere man has told you this, my heavenly Father did. Because Peter says to him, you are the Christ. Now in the Gospel of Luke, we have Jesus responding, well, wait just a moment. Now listen, you guys, keep this to yourself. Do not tell anyone else about this. The rest of the people are not ready to hear this. And what you've said is something that's so profound that even I, in my human nature, have to come to grips with what the Father is calling me to do in terms of my next step in order to fulfill that role. You're absolutely right, Peter, but it's something that the people are not quite ready at this moment to understand. Why not? Because when they say that you're the anointed one, they don't have a clue that what Jesus already has come to know, that's going to entail suffering and even death. So they're not ready for that quite yet. Keep this to yourself. That Jesus knows that what has been uttered is a deep truth, and that it is a truth that comes to him through Peter, but from my heavenly Father. So Jesus is experiencing the depth of what the Father is calling him to in his saving work. What does all of this mean for us? Well, it's an important question. Who do you say that I am? Who am I? It's important for us to realize that in following Christ, it's a question that we will be asking throughout our lives. It doesn't matter how old we are. Who am I? Who is this mystery that God has called me to be? And what specifically is it that God has placed me on the earth for right now? I've had people in their 90s ask me, I wonder each and every day, why is it that God keeps me here? All my brothers and sisters are deceased and so forth, and they say, why am I here? Why does God want me to be here? Is that not the same question? Who do you say that I am? Who does God say that I am? And how can I make the best response to what God's call might be, even if that response entails suffering, as Jesus said that it would? So Jesus did not ask a rhetorical question when he said, who do you say that I am? He really wanted to know, just as all of us need to ask that question continually throughout our whole lives.